It turns ordinary professional writers into snobs and assholes. It turns regular readers into crazed fanatics, and is either the best or the worst thing that an aspiring writer could possibly do, depending on who you ask. Buckle up, we're doing a fan fiction episode.
10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name.
If you've ever been anywhere near the internet or know what a fandom is, then chances are you know about fanfiction. And the possibility is that you're going to know that it is one of a few things, depending on who you ask. 1. It's a great way to find a jaunty, fun extension of the world that you've fallen in love with in a book, TV, or movie. 2. It's a great way to find smutty, dirty sex romps involving your favorite fictional characters. 3. It's a way for silly, immature children to act out their self-insertion fantasies. 4. It's a terrible infringement of copyright and a black hole for the most awful kind of writing that there is in existence. So which category fanfiction actually falls into depends on who you're asking. Suffice to say that everyone is right as far as they're concerned, and we'll leave it at that. I was recently having a chat with some friends about it though, and the question came up: can writing fanfiction turn you into a better writer of original fiction? Well, let's have a look. There are 2 schools of thought on this. The first one is yes, of course it can. Writing anything is still writing. If nothing else, fanfiction writing can get people used to the idea of other people reading what they've got to say, and that can be a surprisingly big hurdle for people to get over. It can also help introduce people to the basics and get people used to what it's like to actually sit down and write. It can actually really help people with something that a lot of newbies really underestimate and is really critical, which is exactly how long it takes to sit down and write a novel. If you're going to write a 70,000 word fan fiction, you're going to get a lesson in how long and frustrating that can be. So if writing that fanfiction helps you figure out whether or not that's something you want to be trying again or doing longer, then brilliant. You also get instant feedback on what you're writing if you're posting it online for other people. Now, this one all sort of straddles the area in between the good for you school of thought and the bad for you school of thought, so I'll say it here right at the end. But having people see and comment on your writing and give you that instant encouragement can be really handy for somebody who's trying to decide if this is the sort of thing that they want to do. Now, the other school of thought is that writing fanfiction is not a good way to become a better writer in general. That feedback that we were just talking about is going to go one of 2 ways. You're either going to be posting to a community that is extremely supportive, which is lovely. That's a lot of the attraction of fanfiction, is that the community you're posting to is a very supportive and lovely one, and you all have common interests. But that does mean that the feedback you're likely to get is things like, oh my god, this is fantastic, this is great, when are we seeing the next bit, so on. It's very, very unlikely to be that sort of constructive criticism that you need to improve. Likewise, the negative stuff that you might get back if you're posting to a bigger place is just more likely to be along the lines of, this sucked, I hated this, what are you doing? There's going to be no indicators to help you improve. If you get an overwhelming amount of positive feedback, that means that you may be lulled into thinking you don't need to improve, which is bad. If you receive an overwhelming amount of negative feedback, this can mean that you will prematurely quit the idea of writing altogether, also bad. Fanfiction can also be a place where you teach yourself bad habits, and then you can reinforce them over and over again. There's very little incentive to review and revise fanfiction, for example. Grammar issues, spelling issues, pacing problems. If you run into all of these sorts of problems, you probably just won't find out until you attempt to write something else. You, of course, can fall into all of these traps in original fiction too. My confession for the conclusion to this video is that I used to write fan fiction myself for Star Wars. This was back before all of the latest movies, and it was one of the most fun times I've ever had on the internet. Writing the stories, creating new characters, extending the world that I really, really loved from the books and the movies and everything like that. It was just great fun. And it really helped me get a sense for what writing my own stories was going to be like one day. And it really showed me that it was something that I wanted to be doing in a more serious capacity. I'd never take that time back. So there are always going to be positives and negatives when it comes to writing and reading fan fiction. People are always going to have their own opinion of what it is, and there's not much you can do to change that. The important thing is, if you want to do it, do it. If you want to read it, read it. There's nothing about it that's going to make you a worse writer, and nothing about reading it that's going to make you an unsophisticated reader in general. Just do what you enjoy. See you next week.